Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we're diving into an exciting Chinese fantasy drama called Fajar Olympus, Future Apollo. If you're a fan of epic adventures, powerful heroes, ancient gods, fierce monster battles, royal conspiracies, and shocking identity reveals, then this story is one you won't want to miss. This incredible drama follows the journey of a young man whose search for his real father leads him into a world far beyond anything he could have imagined. What begins as a simple quest for answers soon becomes a battle to protect an entire kingdom. Along the way, he must confront terrifying creatures, survive deadly betrayals, expose dangerous conspiracies, and uncover a divine secret that has remained hidden since the day he was born. Filled with emotional moments, thrilling action, unexpected twists, and inspiring character development, this story keeps raising the stakes with every episode. So sit back, relax, and let's jump straight into the story. The story opens in a mysterious land where powerful kingdoms stand alongside ancient legends of gods who once walked among humans. Most people now dismiss those legends as nothing more than old myths, but behind the scenes, several secret organizations continue searching for the descendants of those divine beings. They believe that whoever possesses the bloodline of the sun god could completely reshape the future of the kingdom. Living quietly in a peaceful mountain village is a young man named Evan. For as long as he can remember, one question has haunted him more than anything else. Who is his real father? Whenever he asked his mother, she would gently avoid giving him a direct answer. Instead, she always repeated the same mysterious words, "When the time is right, the truth will find you." Those words stayed with Evan throughout his childhood, convincing him that his father wasn't simply someone who had disappeared, but someone connected to a much greater destiny. Unlike most young men in the village, who dream of becoming successful merchants or respected soldiers, Evan spends his days training his body, reading ancient books, and helping anyone in need. His kindness, honesty, and courage earn him the respect of everyone around him. However, there is something unusual about him. Whenever someone he cares about is in danger, Evan displays incredible strength and lightning-fast reflexes that even surprise him. He believes these abilities are simply the result of years of hard work and discipline, never realizing that an extraordinary power has been sleeping within his blood since birth. One quiet morning, everything changes. A mysterious traveler arrives in the village carrying an old golden pendant engraved with the symbol of a shining sun. The instant Evan sees the pendant, he feels a strange pull toward it, as though the object somehow recognizes him. The traveler immediately notices Evan's reaction. Looking closely at the young man, he asks an unexpected question. "Where did you get the birthmark on your shoulder?" Confused, Evan explains that he has had the mark ever since he was born. The birthmark resembles the rays of a rising sun. The traveler's expression instantly changes. He becomes visibly nervous, realizing that the young man standing before him may be the very person described in an ancient prophecy. Before he can reveal anything else, chaos suddenly erupts. A group of masked warriors storms into the village without warning. These are no ordinary bandits searching for valuables. Instead, they rush from house to house asking only one question. Where is the boy with the sun mark? Their leader carries a dark black sword surrounded by sinister energy, making it obvious that they belong to a powerful and dangerous organization. Without hesitation, Evan joins the villagers in defending their home. Although he has never faced highly trained warriors before, his instincts guide every movement with incredible precision. He effortlessly defeats one attacker after another, leaving both the villagers and the masked soldiers completely stunned by his unexpected combat skills. As the battle intensifies, the mysterious traveler throws himself in front of Evan, shielding him from a deadly strike. Badly wounded, the traveler realizes he has little time left. Using the last of his strength, he finally reveals a shocking secret. For years, powerful forces across the kingdom have been searching for someone who bears the mark of Apollo. According to an ancient prophecy, the final descendant of the sun god will one day return and restore balance to a kingdom that has slowly fallen into darkness. Before Evan can ask another question, the traveler presses the golden pendant into his hand. With his dying strength, he tells Evan that if he truly wants to learn the truth about his father, he must travel to the royal capital. Only there will he discover the answers he has been searching for all his life. Moments later, loud horns echo across the valley as royal patrols approach the village. Realizing they can no longer stay, the masked warriors retreat. Before disappearing, their leader locks eyes with Evan and quietly says, "We will meet again." The words sound less like a threat and more like an unavoidable promise of fate, sending a chill through everyone who hears them. After the attack, the village slowly begins to recover, but Evan knows deep inside that his peaceful life is over. The golden pendant left behind by the traveler grows strangely warm whenever he holds it. Soon, mysterious dreams begin haunting his nights. In every dream, he sees a magnificent palace floating high above the clouds. Brilliant golden light fills the sky, and a lone warrior dressed in radiant armor stands waiting. Yet no matter how hard Evan tries, he can never see the warrior's face because it is always hidden behind an overwhelming glow. Each time he reaches toward the mysterious figure, he wakes up just before hearing the warrior's final words. Watching her son struggle with these visions, Evan's mother finally decides she can no longer keep the truth hidden. With tears in her eyes, she confesses that years ago, someone placed a newborn baby in her arms and begged her to protect the child from those hunting the bloodline of Apollo. She was warned never to reveal the boy's true identity until destiny itself forced him onto the path prepared for him since birth. Although she never learned the identity of Evan's real father, she always believed he belonged to a world far beyond ordinary humans. Hearing those words changes everything Evan has ever believed about himself. For the first time, he realizes that his search for his father is not just a personal journey. It may also be the key to unlocking a destiny capable of changing the fate of an entire kingdom. Everything Evan believed about his life changes in a single moment. The simple dream of finding his father is no longer just a personal wish. It has become the beginning of a dangerous journey. He realizes that the truth about his family may also reveal powerful enemies who have been hunting him long before he even knew who he really was. Even with that frightening realization, Evan refuses to back down. If the royal capital is the only place where he can uncover the truth about his past, then he is determined to go there, no matter what dangers await him. The following morning, the entire village gathers to see him off. Some villagers beg him to stay, believing the outside world is far too dangerous for someone his age. Others understand that destiny cannot be avoided forever and quietly wish him a safe journey. Before he leaves, Evan's mother places an old leather map inside his travel bag. The map is worn with age and marked with several forgotten ruins, each carrying the same glowing sun symbol engraved on the golden pendant. She explains that she was instructed to give him the map only when he finally chose to leave the village. Until that moment, it had to remain hidden. Standing at the edge of the valley, Evan takes one final look at the peaceful home where he spent his childhood. He has no idea that every step he takes from this point onward is leading him toward a truth capable of shaking the entire kingdom. Far away inside the magnificent royal palace, influential nobles are secretly battling each other for control of the throne. Deep beneath the earth, terrifying creatures imprisoned within the endless abyss are slowly beginning to awaken. And beyond the reach of ordinary humans, an ancient power connected to the forgotten sun god, Apollo, patiently waits for its rightful heir to claim his destiny. Without realizing it, Evan has already begun the journey that will transform him from an ordinary village boy into one of the greatest heroes the kingdom has ever known. His search for his father has only just begun. Before he can discover the truth about his family, however, he must survive a world where allies often hide dangerous secrets. Enemies seem to know more about his past than he does, and fate itself is preparing to test the strength of his heart. Leaving his village behind, Evan follows a winding mountain road carrying only three things: the mysterious golden pendant, his mother's ancient map, and an unbreakable determination to learn the truth about his origins. As the days pass, the peaceful forests gradually disappear, replaced by wild landscapes filled with towering cliffs, rushing rivers, and dark woods where every shadow feels alive. For the first time in his life, Evan is completely on his own. Yet he cannot shake the feeling that someone is constantly watching him. The dying traveler's warning echoes through his mind again and again. Powerful enemies have been searching for the heir of Apollo long before Evan even knew such a bloodline existed. His journey continues for several days. He crosses icy rivers, climbs steep mountain paths, and spends countless nights beneath the open sky. Along the way, he meets many travelers heading toward the royal capital. Some are wealthy merchants transporting valuable cargo. Others are adventurers hoping to earn fame and fortune by hunting magical beasts. Listening to their conversations, Evan quickly realizes that the kingdom is far less peaceful than it appears. Rumors spread everywhere. Several noble families are secretly raising private armies. People have mysteriously disappeared near the northern border. Ancient prisons that remained sealed for centuries are beginning to break open, allowing terrifying creatures to escape. Most people believe these events are unrelated. But deep inside, Evan feels that everything is somehow connected to the prophecies surrounding Apollo. One afternoon, while passing through a narrow canyon, desperate cries suddenly echo between the cliffs. Without stopping to think, Evan races toward the sound. He discovers a merchant caravan under attack by enormous wolf-like monsters. Their glowing red eyes burn with unnatural rage as they tear through the guards defending the wagons. The soldiers fight bravely, but exhaustion is beginning to overwhelm them. One after another, they collapse while frightened merchants gather together, convinced they are only moments away from death. Evan doesn't hesitate. He grabs a fallen spear from the ground and charges straight into the battle. Although he has never fought monsters before, his movements feel strangely effortless. Every strike lands with incredible accuracy, as though an invisible force is quietly guiding his body. The beasts are far stronger and faster than ordinary wolves, yet Evan quickly adapts to their attacks. He shields the wounded guards and steadily pushes the monsters away from the helpless civilians. Then the battle takes a terrifying turn. A gigantic alpha beast suddenly leaps toward a small child hiding behind a shattered wagon. Without a second thought, Evan throws himself into its path. At that exact instant, the golden pendant hanging around his neck bursts with a warm flash of brilliant sunlight. The enormous beast freezes in fear for a brief moment, almost as if it recognizes the mysterious power. Evan immediately takes advantage of the opening. Gathering every ounce of strength, he drives his weapon forward and defeats the monster with a single decisive strike. The remaining beasts instantly retreat into the forest, leaving behind nothing but complete silence. The grateful merchants surround Evan, thanking him for saving all of their lives. Their leader introduces himself as Marcus, a respected trader who regularly travels between distant kingdoms. After learning that Evan is also heading toward the royal capital, Marcus invites him to travel with the caravan, explaining that the roads ahead are filled with dangerous creatures and ruthless bandits. Knowing the journey will only become more dangerous, Evan gladly accepts. As they travel together, Marcus shares stories about the kingdom's royal family. According to him, the aging king has become increasingly isolated, allowing ambitious nobles to compete for influence behind palace walls. However, one member of the royal family stands apart from the rest. Princess Thea has earned the admiration of people throughout the kingdom because of her wisdom, compassion, and unwavering commitment to justice. Unlike many nobles who rarely leave the palace, she often visits ordinary villages herself, listening to the struggles of common people and doing everything she can to help them. Many citizens believe she is destined to become the greatest ruler the kingdom has ever seen. Unfortunately, not everyone shares that dream. Marcus explains that powerful enemies inside the palace would never allow Princess Thea to inherit the throne without a fight. The more Evan hears about the kingdom's growing political conflict, the more he realizes that his search for his father may be deeply connected to everything happening around him. Several days later, the caravan reaches a bustling border city where travelers from every corner of the continent gather. Massive stone walls protect the city, while colorful marketplaces overflow with rare treasures, magical artifacts, exotic foods, and beautifully crafted weapons. Having spent his entire life in a small mountain village, Evan is amazed by the lively atmosphere. Musicians fill the streets with cheerful melodies. Merchants loudly advertise their goods. Skilled blacksmiths proudly display enchanted swords and armor unlike anything Evan has ever seen. While wandering through the marketplace, he suddenly notices an elderly scholar staring intently at the golden pendant hanging around his neck. The old man slowly approaches, his eyes filled with disbelief. In a quiet voice, he asks, "Young man, where did you get that pendant?" Evan explains that it was given to him by a traveler who sacrificed his life protecting him. The scholar's expression immediately changes. His face turns pale. "That symbol belongs to the forgotten temple of Apollo," he whispers. "I haven't seen one with my own eyes in more than 40 years. Before Evan can ask another question, several heavily armored soldiers suddenly march into the marketplace. Their captain raises a scroll bearing the royal seal and orders everyone to remain where they are while an official investigation is carried out. The soldiers claim they are searching for dangerous criminals. But the elderly scholar quietly leans closer to Evan and speaks in an urgent whisper. "They're not looking for criminals. They're looking for you." Without wasting another second, the old man guides Evan through a maze of narrow back alleys, barely escaping before the soldiers reach them. After making sure they are no longer being followed, the scholar finally introduces himself. His name is Professor Orion, one of the last remaining historians dedicated to studying the forgotten age of the gods. Inside his quiet library, surrounded by ancient scrolls, weathered books, and relics that few people even know still exist, Orion prepares to reveal secrets that could completely change everything Evan believes about his past. Inside the quiet library, Professor Orion carefully examined the golden pendant hanging around Evan's neck. After studying it for several moments, he looked at Evan with a serious expression. According to ancient records, the descendants of Apollo possessed extraordinary potential unlike any ordinary human. However, after a devastating war between the divine bloodlines centuries ago, the surviving heirs disappeared into secrecy. Over time, people believed the entire bloodline had been wiped out forever. Orion then walked toward an old painting preserved inside the library. It showed a magnificent warrior standing beneath a blazing golden sun, dressed in radiant armor that reflected the light in every direction. Around the warrior's neck hung a pendant identical to the one Evan carried. Pointing toward the painting, Orion spoke quietly. This man was the first guardian of Apollo. Evan stared at the ancient artwork in complete silence. Seeing the same pendant around the legendary warrior's neck made everything feel far more real than ever before. But Orion wasn't finished. "There is something even more important," he continued. "The prophecy doesn't only predict the return of Apollo's descendant. It also warns that when darkness rises from the abyss, only the child carrying Apollo's light will be able to save the kingdom from destruction." Evan frowned. "The abyss?" he asked. The old scholar nodded gravely. "Long ago, countless monstrous creatures were imprisoned beneath the earth inside a vast underground chasm known as the abyss. Powerful seals created by ancient guardians kept those monsters trapped for generations. But recently, those seals had begun to weaken. The room fell completely silent. Evan immediately remembered the terrifying wolf-like monsters that had attacked Marcus's caravan. If those creatures were only a small glimpse of what remained imprisoned below the earth, then the kingdom was facing a catastrophe beyond imagination. Before Orion could reveal anything else, disaster struck. Without warning, the library windows exploded inward. Dark arrows flew across the room from every direction as masked assassins dressed entirely in black burst inside. Their movements were fast, silent, and deadly. The leader immediately pointed his weapon toward Evan. The heir of Apollo dies today. Within seconds, the peaceful library became a battlefield. Bookshelves crashed onto the floor while ancient scrolls scattered through the air. Knowing they had little chance against so many attackers, Orion rushed toward Evan and pushed him toward a hidden passage concealed behind one of the shelves. "Go," the old scholar shouted. "You cannot die here." Evan hesitated. "What about you?" A calm smile appeared on Orion's face. "I have spent my entire life protecting these ancient records. Today, I will protect the future instead." Realizing there was no time to argue, Evan reluctantly escaped through the secret tunnel while Orion stayed behind to delay the assassins. After crawling through the narrow underground passage for several minutes, Evan finally emerged outside the city walls. Breathing heavily, he turned back and saw dark smoke rising above the city skyline. He desperately wanted to return and help Orion, But he knew the scholar's sacrifice would be meaningless if he allowed himself to be captured. As the sun slowly disappeared behind the distant mountains, Evan tightened his grip on the golden pendant. Instead of finding answers, every discovery only raised even more questions. Someone inside the kingdom desperately wanted Apollo's bloodline erased forever. Someone powerful enough to command elite assassins, and even influence royal soldiers. Meanwhile, deep beneath the earth, the ancient darkness sealed inside the abyss continued to awaken. Without realizing it, Evan was no longer simply searching for his father. He had become the central figure in a conflict that would determine the future of the entire kingdom. The cold wind swept across the endless plains as Evan continued his journey away from the border city. Although he had escaped with his life, Professor Orion's final words refused to leave his thoughts. The prophecy was no longer just an old legend. Powerful people clearly believed it was real, and they were willing to eliminate anyone connected to Apollo's bloodline before destiny could unfold. Evan still didn't know who his father was, or why his existence frightened so many influential figures. But one thing had become impossible to ignore. His life would never return to the peaceful days he once knew. To avoid being tracked, he stayed away from the main roads for several days, choosing hidden forest paths and abandoned trails instead. Every unfamiliar sound immediately made him reach for his sword. After everything that had happened, trusting strangers no longer came naturally. Even so, his compassionate nature never changed. Whenever he encountered injured travelers or villages threatened by wild beasts, he stepped in without hesitation. No matter how dangerous the situation became, Evan refused to ignore those who needed help. One quiet evening, while resting beside a peaceful river, something unusual happened. The golden pendant around his neck began glowing once again. Unlike the brief flash that had frightened the wolf monster earlier, this light remained steady, almost as if it were guiding him somewhere. Curious, Evan followed the mysterious glow deep into the surrounding forest. Nearly half an hour later, he arrived at the entrance of forgotten ruins completely hidden beneath thick vines and moss. Massive stone pillars surrounded the ancient site, each carved with faded images of a radiant sun shining over kneeling warriors. The moment Evan stepped inside, the pendant shone even brighter. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet began to shake. With a deep rumbling sound, an enormous stone door slowly opened by itself. Dust filled the air as sunlight poured into a hidden chamber that had remained sealed for centuries. Inside stood rows of magnificent stone guardians, each wearing ancient armor and silently facing a beautiful altar. At the center of the altar rested a crystal sphere radiating warm golden light. The entire chamber felt peaceful, yet filled with unimaginable power. It was almost as though someone, or something, had been patiently waiting for Evan's arrival all this time. As he cautiously approached the altar, ancient symbols carved into the walls suddenly began glowing one after another. Then a calm but powerful voice echoed throughout the chamber. "Who seeks the light of Apollo?" Startled, Evan quickly looked around. The chamber was completely empty. Gathering his courage, he answered honestly, "My name is Evan. I don't seek power. I'm only searching for the truth about my father." Silence followed. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then the crystal suddenly released a brilliant beam of golden light that completely surrounded him. Instead of pain, Evan felt an overwhelming warmth flowing through every part of his body. At that moment, countless mysterious visions flashed before his eyes. He saw magnificent temples reaching toward the heavens, golden-armored warriors battling terrifying creatures born from pure darkness. And standing above them all, a majestic figure beneath an enormous blazing sun. Although the man's face remained hidden behind brilliant light, Evan felt an unexplainable connection to him, as if they shared the same soul. Just as suddenly as the visions appeared, they vanished. The mysterious voice echoed through the chamber once again. "The blood of Apollo still lives." Before Evan could ask another question, a deafening explosion shook the ruins. Stone pillars collapsed as armed soldiers flooded the temple from every direction. Standing at their head was the same masked commander who had attacked Evan's village. A cruel smile spread across his face. "So, our information was correct. The temple truly recognized you." Evan immediately stepped away from the altar and drew his sword. "Who are you? Why are you hunting me?" The commander laughed. You still know nothing. That's almost disappointing. Slowly, he removed his mask, revealing a long scar stretching across his face. My name is General Kale. I serve the future ruler of this kingdom, and that future has no place for Apollo's heir. Without another word, Kale raised his hand. The soldiers charged forward. Once again, the ancient temple became a battlefield. Although hopelessly outnumbered, Evan fought with unwavering determination. Using the narrow hallways to his advantage, he prevented the enemy from surrounding him completely. One after another, soldiers fell before him. Astonishing, experienced warriors who couldn't believe a young man with no formal military training possessed such incredible skill. Watching from a distance, General Kale narrowed his eyes. So, he muttered quietly, the bloodline has already begun to awaken. Realizing ordinary soldiers would never defeat Evan, Kale finally stepped onto the battlefield himself. The instant their swords collided, Evan understood exactly why the commander held such a feared reputation. General Kale's strength, speed, and combat experience were on an entirely different level, making him the most dangerous opponent Evan had ever faced. The moment Evan's sword collided with General Kale's blade, he realized he was facing an opponent unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Kale possessed incredible speed, overwhelming strength, and years of battlefield experience. Every strike forced Evan to retreat another step, while showers of sparks filled the ancient temple as steel clashed against steel. Despite fighting with everything he had, Evan soon found himself breathing heavily. General Kale, on the other hand, remained completely composed. With complete confidence, he looked at Evan and said, "You fight on instinct alone, but instinct can never overcome true experience." The next attack came with tremendous force. Kale's sword smashed into Evan's weapon, sending it flying across the chamber. Before Evan could recover, the general closed the distance and pointed his blade directly at Evan's chest. This is where your story ends. Just as defeat seemed inevitable, something extraordinary happened. The crystal resting upon the ancient altar suddenly erupted with an intense burst of golden light. The entire temple began shaking violently. At the same time, every stone guardian standing silently around the chamber slowly opened its glowing eyes. For centuries, they had remained motionless. Now, they had awakened. To Kale's surprise, the guardians completely ignored Evan. Instead, they turned toward the invading soldiers. The general's expression changed instantly. "Retreat," he shouted. But it was already too late. The gigantic stone warriors charged forward with unstoppable force, protecting Apollo's temple exactly as they had done countless generations before. Chaos consumed the chamber. Soldiers fled in every direction while enormous stone weapons crushed everything that stood in their path. Taking advantage of the confusion, Evan rushed across the battlefield, recovered his sword, and escaped through a hidden passage revealed as the statues moved. By the time Kale fought his way free, Evan had already disappeared into the surrounding forest. Surprisingly, the general wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled. The prophecy is unfolding faster than I expected. Far away from the temple, Evan continued running until he was certain no one was following him. Only then did he finally stop to catch his breath. Looking down at the golden pendant hanging around his neck, he noticed something had changed. A faint golden symbol had appeared on its surface, one that hadn't existed before entering Apollo's temple. Even more surprising was what he felt inside himself. Energy now flowed naturally through every part of his body. His senses had become remarkably sharper. He could hear birds singing from incredible distances. He could sense even the smallest changes in the wind. And faint footsteps, almost impossible for ordinary people to notice, reached his ears with perfect clarity. Whatever had happened inside the temple, it had awakened a hidden power sleeping deep within his blood. Meanwhile, far away inside the magnificent royal capital, a very different battle was taking place. Instead of swords, politics had become the weapon of choice. Princess Thea attended an emergency council meeting alongside the kingdom's most powerful nobles. Every day, alarming reports continued arriving. Monster attacks were increasing. Entire villages were disappearing. Armed groups were gathering near the borders. The kingdom was slowly falling into crisis. Yet rather than discussing how to protect their people, many influential nobles argued only about expanding their own political authority. Princess Thea listened quietly for a while. Finally, she could remain silent no longer. Our people are suffering, she said firmly. Entire communities are begging for help, yet all you discuss is power. One elderly noble answered with a polite smile that barely concealed his arrogance. Your Highness, ruling a kingdom requires difficult priorities. Thea looked directly at him. No, she replied calmly. Ruling a kingdom requires responsibility. Her words filled the council chamber with uncomfortable silence. What most people inside that room didn't know was that several of those very nobles had already become part of a secret conspiracy. Their goal was simple: seize control of the throne before the aging king could stop them. And standing at the center of that conspiracy was General Kale. While politicians struggled for power inside the palace, a far greater danger was awakening beneath the kingdom itself. Deep below the mountains, inside the endless abyss, ancient magical seals continued breaking apart. Huge cracks spread across barriers that had imprisoned countless monsters for centuries. Then, in the darkness, a massive creature slowly opened its glowing crimson eyes. For the first time in generations, the darkness beneath the kingdom had begun to awaken. Without realizing it, Evan's search for his father was leading him toward a conflict that would determine not only the future of the royal family, but the survival of the entire kingdom. Unaware of everything happening inside the capital, Evan continued traveling through the wilderness. Ever since entering Apollo's temple, the mysterious power within him had continued growing. Although it still felt unfamiliar, it never frightened him. Instead, it gave him an overwhelming sense of purpose, almost as if destiny itself had been quietly guiding every step of his life since the day he was born. Yet despite all the mysteries surrounding him, one question remained at the center of his heart. Who was his father? And why had someone gone to such extraordinary lengths to hide him from the world? Eventually, the dense forest opened into a vast valley crowded with thousands of refugees making their way toward the royal capital. Entire families carried whatever belongings they could save. Exhausted soldiers escorted frightened civilians along the road. Concerned, Evan approached one of the officers. What happened? He asked. The weary captain let out a deep sigh. 3 villages near the eastern mountains disappeared overnight. Evan frowned. Disappeared? The officer nodded. Very few people survived. Those who escaped claimed enormous creatures emerged from deep cracks in the earth. At first we thought fear had confused them, but our scouts found footprints unlike anything we've ever seen. Hearing those words immediately reminded Evan of Professor Orion's warning about the abyss. The prophecy was becoming reality. As the refugees continued walking, a little girl accidentally dropped her small wooden doll into the muddy road. Before she could reach it, a heavy wagon rolled toward the toy. Without hesitation, Evan stepped forward, picked it up, and gently handed it back to her. Thank you, the little girl whispered with a grateful smile. Her mother bowed respectfully. You've shown more kindness in a single moment than some nobles showed during their entire lives. Those simple words stayed with Evan long after the refugees disappeared over the horizon. Whoever was responsible for the kingdom's growing disaster, ordinary people were suffering the most. Instead of continuing directly toward the capital, Evan decided to investigate the destroyed villages himself. By sunset, he arrived at the first abandoned settlement. The silence was unsettling. Broken doors hung from shattered houses. Deep claw marks scarred the stone streets. Everywhere he looked, there were signs of a desperate battle. Yet strangely, not a single monster remained. It was as though the creatures had attacked without warning and vanished just as quickly. While searching through the ruins, Evan made another disturbing discovery. Several dead soldiers lay among the destroyed buildings, but their armor didn't belong to the royal army. Each breastplate carried the symbol of a black serpent. Curious, Evan searched one of the bodies. Hidden beneath the armor, he found a sealed letter. Most of it had been damaged during the fighting. Only one sentence could still be read clearly. Proceed with the Abyss Gate according to General Kale's orders. Evan's face grew serious. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. General Kale wasn't merely hunting Apollo's descendants. He was somehow directly connected to the monsters emerging from the abyss. Before Evan had time to think any further, a thunderous roar echoed across the valley. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Then, from behind the ruined buildings, an enormous creature slowly emerged. This monster was nothing like the wolf beasts he had fought before. It towered nearly 3 times the height of a man. Its body was covered in thick black scales, and its massive claws looked powerful enough to tear through solid stone with ease. The enormous beast slowly advanced across the ruined village, each heavy step shattering the stone beneath its feet. Its crimson eyes glowed with uncontrollable rage, and its deafening roar echoed through the empty streets. There was no chance to escape. Evan tightened his grip on his sword and prepared himself. The battle began immediately. The monster attacked with overwhelming power. Every swing of its massive claws smashed through walls, sending clouds of dust and broken stone flying into the air. Evan barely avoided one attack after another. Instead of matching the creature's strength, he relied on speed, timing, and quick footwork. But after several exchanges, he realized a terrifying truth. His sword could barely penetrate the monster's thick scales. This isn't enough, he thought. As the beast charged once again, something unexpected happened. The golden pendant around his neck began to glow. Warm light spread across its surface before flowing into Evan's body like sunlight. Rather than resisting the strange energy, he allowed it to move naturally through him. A powerful warmth filled his arms. Moments later, a thin golden aura surrounded his sword. The monster lunged forward again. This time, Evan didn't dodge. Instead, he met the attack head-on. To his surprise, he held his ground. Even the monster seemed startled. For the first time, Evan's blade sliced cleanly through the creature's armored scales. The beast roared in pain. Realizing he had finally discovered its weakness, Evan pressed the attack without hesitation. The fierce battle continued as both warrior and monster pushed themselves to their absolute limits. Finally, the creature prepared one last devastating charge. Evan gathered every bit of golden energy flowing through his body. With a powerful downward strike, he unleashed everything at once. A brilliant flash of golden light exploded across the battlefield. For a brief moment, everything became silent. The monster froze in place. Then its enormous body crashed to the ground. The battle was over. Breathing heavily, Evan watched as the creature slowly dissolved into black smoke. When the darkness faded, only a strange black crystal remained on the ground. It was small enough to fit in his hand. Curious, Evan picked it up. The crystal felt unnaturally cold, almost as though it carried the darkness of the abyss within it. Before he had time to examine it more closely, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the village. A group of riders wearing polished silver armor entered the ruins. Leading them was a young woman dressed in a white cloak embroidered with the royal emblem. The moment she saw the defeated monster, she ordered her soldiers to lower their weapons. She looked at Evan with calm curiosity. "So, you're the one who defeated it?" Evan nodded modestly. "I only did what anyone else would have done." The young woman smiled slightly. "I don't believe that's true. That monster destroyed 3 military squads before you arrived." She then introduced herself simply as Thea. Evan had no idea that he was speaking with the kingdom's princess. Traveling without royal ceremony, Thea had secretly left the capital to investigate the growing monster attacks herself. After examining the battlefield, her attention shifted toward the black crystal in Evan's hand. "Where did you find that?" she asked. "It was left behind after the monster disappeared," Evan replied. Thea's expression immediately became serious. "Our royal scholars have been searching for these crystals." Before she could explain why, one of her soldiers rushed toward her. "Captain, another village has been attacked. Survivors report that more creatures are moving south." Without hesitation, Thea turned toward her troops. "We're leaving immediately." Before mounting her horse, she looked back at Evan. "You fight better than many trained knights. The kingdom needs people like you now more than ever." After a brief pause, she added, "If you're traveling to the royal capital, I'm sure we'll meet again." Without revealing her true identity, she rode away with her soldiers. Within moments, the entire unit disappeared down the road. Evan watched them leave. There was something different about Thea. She carried the authority of a true leader without arrogance. Unlike many powerful people he had encountered, she seemed genuinely concerned about protecting ordinary citizens rather than chasing personal glory. As darkness covered the ruined village, Evan set up camp nearby. Before going to sleep, he placed the mysterious black crystal beside the golden pendant. Almost immediately, both objects reacted. Golden light and dark energy briefly swirled around each other before separating once again. At that exact moment, another vision flooded Evan's mind. He found himself standing before an enormous underground gate bound by gigantic ancient chains. Beyond the gate, countless glowing red eyes stared at him from endless darkness. Then a deep voice echoed through the void. The first seal has fallen. Evan suddenly opened his eyes, breathing heavily. The campfire still burned quietly beside him. The pendant had returned to normal. The black crystal remained completely still. Yet one thing was now painfully clear. The monsters attacking the kingdom were not acting randomly. Someone was deliberately breaking the seals that kept the creatures of the abyss imprisoned. Far away inside the royal palace, General Kale stood within a hidden chamber beneath the castle. Around him gathered several hooded nobles. A massive stone table covered with maps filled the center of the room. One of the nobles spoke first. The first abyss beast has been defeated. General Kale remained perfectly calm. That changes nothing. Another noble asked, and what about Apollo's heir? A confident smile appeared on Kale's face. He's becoming stronger, exactly as we expected. The others exchanged confused looks. One finally asked, then why haven't you killed him? Kale slowly narrowed his eyes. Because the gate cannot fully open without the blood of Apollo. The room fell into complete silence. None of the conspirators realized that someone hidden behind the chamber walls had overheard every word. Without making a sound, the mysterious listener slipped away into the darkness. Whoever it was had only one goal: to warn the one person who still believed the kingdom could be saved. Princess Thea. The following morning, Evan packed his belongings before sunrise and resumed his journey toward the royal capital. Although he still couldn't fully understand the vision he had experienced during the night, one sentence continued echoing inside his mind. The first seal has fallen. If the vision was real, then the monster he had defeated was only the beginning. Far beneath the kingdom, many more creatures were waiting for the remaining seals to break. As Evan continued traveling across the countryside, he noticed fear spreading everywhere. Villages that had once been lively now kept their gates tightly closed even during daylight. Farmers no longer worked in distant fields without armed escorts. Travelers formed large groups before entering forests, hoping safety could be found in numbers. No matter where Evan went, he heard the same frightening rumors. Some believed the gods had abandoned humanity. Others claimed an ancient curse had returned. No one knew the truth, but everyone could feel that the kingdom was slowly changing. Around midday, Evan arrived at a heavily fortified town surrounded by towering stone walls. Hundreds of soldiers were strengthening defensive barricades while blacksmiths worked without rest, forging swords, spears, and armor day and night. The atmosphere was filled with tension, making it clear that the entire kingdom was preparing for a war unlike anything it had faced before. As Evan entered the fortified town, he noticed an unusually large crowd gathered in the central square. Curious, he made his way through the people to see what was happening. Standing on a wooden platform was a royal messenger holding an official scroll sealed with the kingdom's emblem. In a loud voice, the messenger announced, "By order of the Royal Council, all capable knights, adventurers, and warriors are invited to join the kingdom's defense against the growing monster threat along the eastern frontier. Those who distinguish themselves in battle will receive generous rewards and be personally recognized by the royal family." The announcement immediately stirred excitement throughout the crowd. Many young warriors saw it as an opportunity to earn honor and glory. Others were motivated by something far more important: the desire to protect their homes and families. Evan remained silent. Joining the royal army could bring him closer to the answers he had been searching for, especially if his father truly had ties to the royal palace. But at the same time, openly displaying his growing powers could expose him to General Kale and the mysterious organization hunting Apollo's heir. As he weighed his options, chaos suddenly erupted. A terrified soldier came running through the southern gate, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Move! Everyone move! The monsters are attacking!" Panic spread through the town before the guards could fully organize their defenses. Several enormous creatures smashed through the outer barricades, forcing their way toward the streets. These monsters were different from the ones Evan had fought before. Instead of attacking wildly, they moved with frightening discipline, almost as though someone was directing every one of their actions. The captain of the town guard immediately drew his sword. "Protect the civilians," he shouted. Without hesitation, Evan rushed toward the battle. The fighting became chaotic within seconds. Monsters tore through defensive lines while frightened families fled toward the safety of the castle at the center of town. One gigantic beast climbed onto the rooftops, preparing to leap directly into the crowd below. Seeing the danger, Evan acted instantly. He sprinted toward a nearby wagon, used it as a platform, and launched himself high into the air. His sword, glowing with golden energy, struck the monster in mid-leap. Both crashed violently onto the street below, shattering the stone pavement. Before the creature could recover, Evan delivered another powerful strike infused with Apollo's light. The monster collapsed. The nearby soldiers erupted in cheers. Inspired by Evan's courage, they regained their confidence and launched a coordinated counterattack. Little by little, the defenders forced the monsters back beyond the town walls. After nearly an hour of brutal fighting, the final creature was defeated. Exhausted soldiers celebrated their hard-earned victory, but their relief lasted only a few seconds. One of the fallen monsters suddenly released thick black mist into the air. The smoke gathered together until it formed the outline of a shadowy human figure. Its glowing crimson eyes slowly opened. An unnatural voice echoed across the battlefield. "So, the heir of Apollo has finally revealed himself." The entire town fell silent. The mysterious figure ignored everyone else. Its attention remained fixed entirely on Evan. "You cannot stop what has already begun." Slowly, it raised one shadowy hand. "The Abyss King is awakening." Before anyone could react, the figure dissolved into black smoke and disappeared. Silence followed. The soldiers stared at Evan with confusion. None of them understood why the mysterious being had called him Apollo's heir. Realizing that too many dangerous questions would soon be asked, Evan quietly slipped away before anyone could stop him. Later that evening, he sat alone beside a peaceful river just outside the town. For the first time since leaving his village, uncertainty crept into his heart. He stared at the flowing water and quietly wondered, what if General Kale is right? If people discover who I really am, will I only bring disaster to those around me? Lost in thought, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching from behind. A familiar voice broke the silence. "You saved many lives today." Evan turned around. Standing before him was the same young woman he had met in the ruined village. Thea. This time, she wore simple traveling clothes instead of armor, making it almost impossible to recognize her as a member of the royal family. "You were there?" Evan asked. She nodded. "I arrived after the battle had already begun." Taking a seat on a nearby stone, she smiled. "For someone who claims to be an ordinary traveler, you certainly find extraordinary situations." Evan couldn't help smiling in return. "I could say exactly the same thing about you." For a brief moment, both of them laughed together. It was the first peaceful conversation Evan had enjoyed since beginning his journey. After a while, Thea noticed the concern on his face. "Something is troubling you, isn't it?" Evan hesitated before speaking. "Have you ever wondered if your destiny might end up hurting the very people you're trying to protect?" Thea remained silent for several seconds. Then she looked toward the evening sky. "Every single day." Her voice was calm but sincere. "Sometimes leadership means carrying burdens that no one else can understand." She paused before continuing. "If we spend our lives running away from responsibility because we're afraid of failing, then innocent people are the ones who suffer." Her words struck Evan deeply. Without knowing anything about his true identity, she had given him exactly the encouragement he needed. Looking back at him, Thea smiled gently. "I don't know what you're facing, but I've learned that a person's true worth isn't determined by the power they possess. It's determined by the choices they make." Evan looked at her with newfound admiration. Whoever she truly was, she possessed remarkable wisdom and compassion. Before either of them could continue the conversation, several royal guards suddenly appeared. "There you are," one of them called out. "We've been searching everywhere." The soldiers immediately bowed respectfully toward Thea. "Your Highness." Evan froze. Thea sighed softly. "I was hoping to avoid formalities a little longer." The royal guards quickly formed a protective circle around her. Only then did Evan finally understand the truth. The woman he had been traveling with, the woman who had inspired him, was none other than Princess Thea. Embarrassed, Evan immediately bowed his head. "Please forgive me, princess. I didn't realize who you were." Thea gently interrupted him with a warm smile. "There's nothing to forgive. You treated me like an ordinary person. I appreciated that." Before mounting her horse, she looked back at him one final time. "I have a feeling this won't be our last meeting." With that, Princess Thea rode away toward the royal capital, surrounded by her royal escort. Evan watched until she disappeared beyond the distant hills. Neither of them realized they had been watched the entire time. Hidden among the trees overlooking the river stood General Kale. He had observed their entire conversation without either of them noticing. One of his masked followers quietly stepped beside him. "Should we eliminate him now?" the man asked. Kale slowly shook his head. "No." His eyes remained fixed on the road where Princess Thea had disappeared. "Everything is unfolding exactly as it should." The follower looked puzzled. "You expected them to meet?" A faint smile crossed Kale's face. Fate becomes a powerful weapon when you know how to control it. Far beneath the earth, where the ancient darkness of the abyss continued to stir, the next stage of Kale's plan was already beginning. Deep beneath the earth, inside the endless darkness of the abyss, another ancient seal finally gave way. A thunderous crack echoed through the underground prison as chains that had remained unbroken for centuries snapped one after another. From the darkness, a gigantic claw slowly emerged. Moments later, a terrifying roar shook the depths of the earth with such overwhelming force that even the mountains above trembled. The second seal had fallen, and with every seal that broke, the kingdom moved one step closer to the greatest war in its history. The morning after his meeting with Princess Thea, Evan continued his journey with a renewed sense of purpose. Until recently, his only goal had been to discover the truth about his father. But after witnessing the suffering spreading across the kingdom and hearing Thea speak about responsibility, he realized that his journey had become far greater than a search for his past. Every village he visited reminded him that ordinary people were placing their hopes in heroes they had never even met. Whether he accepted it or not, he was slowly becoming one of those heroes. As he drew closer to the royal capital, the kingdom's military presence became impossible to ignore. Watchtowers had been built along the major roads. Soldiers patrolled the highways day and night. Every traveler entering the region was carefully questioned before being allowed to continue. News of the monster attacks had spread across the entire kingdom. Fear was everywhere, but so was determination. Farmers volunteered to supply food for the army. Blacksmiths worked around the clock forging weapons and armor. Young men and women eagerly stepped forward to defend their homeland. Late that afternoon, Evan reached a massive stone bridge stretching across one of the kingdom's largest rivers. Hundreds of merchants, travelers, and soldiers waited patiently in line for inspection before crossing into the capital. While waiting, Evan noticed an elderly merchant struggling to carry several heavy baskets. Without warning, the old man lost his balance, scattering fruit across the road. Without hesitation, Evan rushed over to help gather everything. The elderly merchant smiled gratefully. "Thank you, young man. These old bones aren't as strong as they used to be." As they collected the fallen fruit together, the merchant's eyes briefly settled on the golden pendant hidden beneath Evan's shirt. For just a moment, his expression changed. Then, as quickly as it appeared, his calm smile returned. In a quiet voice, he said, "You should be careful with valuable heirlooms." Evan looked surprised. "It's only a family keepsake." The old man smiled knowingly. Some keepsakes carry the weight of history. Before Evan could ask what he meant, the merchant simply nodded politely and disappeared into the crowd. The brief encounter left Evan with an uneasy feeling. It seemed as though the old man recognized the pendant, but had deliberately chosen not to reveal everything he knew. After passing through the inspection gates, Evan finally entered the outer district of the royal capital. The city was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Towering buildings lined broad stone streets filled with merchants from distant kingdoms. Magnificent fountains decorated public squares. Enormous statues honored legendary heroes whose names had become part of history. Yet despite its breathtaking beauty, something felt different. The capital was tense. Everywhere Evan looked, heavily armed soldiers stood on guard. The city wasn't celebrating prosperity. It was preparing for war. Inside the royal palace, Princess Thea stood beside the aging king as military commanders delivered increasingly troubling reports. One general stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the eastern frontier continues losing ground." Another added, "Monster sightings have doubled within the last week." Then a third commander spoke. "Our scouts have also discovered several abandoned temples showing signs of recent activity." The king frowned. "Ancient temples?" "Yes, Your Majesty," the commander replied. "Shrines connected to forgotten legends." Standing quietly among the assembled officers was General Kale. When Apollo's temples were mentioned, he carefully hid his reaction. But Princess Thea noticed. Although Kale's face remained calm, she could no longer ignore the growing suspicion in her heart. Ever since the mysterious warning she had secretly overheard beneath the palace, she had become convinced that someone inside the royal government was hiding a dangerous truth. She simply didn't know who. Not yet. Meanwhile, Evan continued searching the capital for clues connected to the golden pendant and the ancient map his mother had entrusted to him. The worn map marked several forgotten locations. One mysterious symbol pointed directly toward the oldest district of the capital. Following the faded markings through quiet back streets, Evan eventually reached a peaceful neighborhood far removed from the crowded marketplaces. Ancient stone buildings surrounded a forgotten courtyard where ivy covered weathered walls. At its center stood a small abandoned chapel dedicated to the sun. Most citizens passed by without even noticing it. To them, it was nothing more than another forgotten ruin. But the moment Evan approached, the golden pendant around his neck began glowing once again. Slowly, he pushed open the old wooden doors. Inside, sunlight poured through cracked stained glass windows, illuminating a magnificent mosaic that covered the floor. The artwork depicted a radiant warrior holding a blazing golden spear. Standing beside him was another figure, whose face had been deliberately destroyed. Evan knelt beside the damaged mosaic. Why would someone erase only that person's face? Before he could investigate further, footsteps echoed through the chapel. A familiar voice broke the silence. "You found this place sooner than I expected." Evan turned immediately. Standing near the entrance was the same elderly merchant he had helped at the bridge. This time, however, the gentle smile had disappeared from the old man's face. "My name is Lucian," he said calmly. "I've been waiting many years to meet you." Instinctively, Evan reached for his sword. "Who are you?" Lucian slowly raised both hands. "If I intended to harm you, I would never have revealed myself." After a long silence, Evan relaxed slightly. "You know this place?" Lucian nodded. "I know far more than that." He slowly walked toward the damaged mosaic. Gently brushing away centuries of dust, he rested his hand on the ruined figure. "Long ago," he explained, "this chapel served the guardians of Apollo." His voice became quieter. "The warrior whose face was erased." He paused for a moment. "Was your father?" Evan froze. For several seconds, he couldn't even breathe. "My father." Lucian nodded slowly. "His name was Helios. He was one of the greatest protectors this kingdom has ever known." Evan stood silently, staring at the broken mosaic. After everything he had endured, he finally had a name. "So," he whispered, "he's dead." Lucian hesitated before answering. "I don't know." Evan looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" The old man sighed. "Many years ago, Helios disappeared during the final battle against the servants of the abyss. His body was never found. Some believed he sacrificed himself to protect the kingdom. Others believed he was captured by the enemy." He paused once more, his expression growing more serious. "And a few still believe he may be alive." Lucian lowered his voice before continuing. "Some people still believe Helios survived." Those words sent Evan's heart racing. For years, he had imagined one day finding his father. Now, for the first time, he finally had a name, Helios. Yet instead of bringing complete answers, the truth only raised even more questions. Before Evan could ask anything else, Lucian reached into his cloak and carefully removed an old scroll sealed with the same radiant sun emblem engraved on Evan's pendant. Holding it with great respect, he said, "This once belonged to your father." He placed it into Evan's hands. "I was entrusted with one instruction, to give this to Helios's son only after he proved himself worthy." Evan slowly broke the ancient seal. Inside the scroll, only a single sentence had been written: "Trust the light, even when darkness wears a familiar face." He read the words several times before looking back at Lucian. "What does it mean?" The old guardian sighed. "I wish I knew." Before either of them could continue, loud church bells suddenly rang across the royal capital. Shouts echoed through the streets. Soldiers raced past the chapel as terrified citizens began running in every direction. A royal announcement spread rapidly throughout the city. The western defensive wall has fallen. Monsters have breached the outer districts. Instant panic erupted. Families fled toward the palace while soldiers rushed toward the battlefield. Lucian's expression turned grim. They've reached the capital. Without hesitation, Evan drew his sword. I have to help. Lucian nodded proudly. Go. Then he added one final warning. But remember your father's words. The greatest enemy is not always the one standing in front of you. Without another second to spare, Evan sprinted through the crowded streets toward the sounds of battle. Dark smoke already covered the sky. Buildings were burning. People screamed as enormous abyss creatures smashed through defensive barricades. Royal knights desperately fought to protect fleeing civilians. At the center of the chaos stood Princess Thea. Instead of remaining safely inside the palace, she was fighting alongside her soldiers, defending frightened children trapped beneath collapsed buildings. The moment Evan saw her surrounded by monsters, he charged straight into the battle. Neither of them realized it yet, but this would become the moment their destinies truly began to unite. Elsewhere in the city, hidden from everyone's sight, General Kale silently watched the invasion unfold. Everything was happening exactly according to his plan. Smoke drifted across the skyline as the once beautiful capital transformed into a war zone. Marketplaces burned. Buildings collapsed. The streets echoed with the roars of monstrous creatures and the desperate cries of innocent people. Although the royal knights fought with incredible determination, the abyss creatures were stronger and far more organized than before. This wasn't a random invasion. Someone had carefully orchestrated it. Evan pushed deeper into the city without slowing down. Every street revealed another desperate struggle. He rescued trapped civilians, helped wounded soldiers retreat to safety, and confronted every monster standing in his path. Each time innocent lives were threatened, the golden power inside him responded naturally. His sword shone brighter with every battle, drawing the attention of both friends and enemies alike. Near the shattered western gate, Princess Thea remained at the center of the kingdom's defense. Her royal guards repeatedly urged her to retreat, but she refused. If my people are risking their lives, she declared, then their princess will fight beside them. Her courage inspired exhausted soldiers to keep fighting. Then, the ground began to shake. An enormous abyss monster emerged through the broken city wall. It towered over nearby buildings. Dark armor-like scales covered its massive body, while glowing crimson veins pulsed beneath its skin. Every step cracked the stone streets beneath its feet. The monster released a deafening roar before swinging one gigantic arm toward the defenders. Several soldiers were thrown through the air by the impact. Thea immediately took command. Spread out. Don't face it head-on. But the creature ignored the soldiers completely. Instead, it charged directly toward the frightened civilians trying to escape behind them. Without hesitation, Thea stepped into its path. She knew she couldn't defeat such a monster alone. But if buying a few seconds allowed innocent people to escape, she was willing to risk her own life. The monster raised its enormous claw. It came crashing downward. At that exact moment, a streak of brilliant golden light flashed across the battlefield. Evan arrived. His glowing sword collided with the monster's claws, creating a tremendous shockwave that echoed through the city. The force pushed both Evan and the creature backward. Thea looked at him in surprise. You. Evan gave a quick smile. Looks like we met again at exactly the right time. There was no time for another word. The monster attacked again. This time, Evan and Thea fought side by side. Although they had never trained together, their movements blended together naturally. Thea's elegant swordsmanship kept the monster distracted, while Evan struck with powerful attacks fueled by Apollo's growing light. Together, they slowly forced the gigantic creature away from the crowded streets, preventing it from reaching the civilians. Watching from nearby rooftops, soldiers could hardly believe what they were seeing. Neither warrior could have defeated the monster alone, but together, they were steadily turning the battle in their favor. High above the city, inside the royal palace, the aging king watched the battle unfold from a balcony. Standing beside him was his most trusted royal advisor. The king's attention remained fixed on Evan. His eyes widened. "The light," he whispered. "It has finally returned." The advisor slowly nodded. Then the prophecy was true after all. Before they could say anything else, General Kale entered the chamber. He bowed respectfully before the king. "Your Majesty, the Western District cannot be defended much longer." The king looked toward him. "What do you recommend?" Kale lowered his head. "The royal family should withdraw immediately to the inner fortress." Princess Thea's advisor immediately objected. "If we abandon the city now, thousands of innocent people will be left behind." Kale remained perfectly calm. The survival of the royal bloodline must take priority. The king did not answer immediately. Instead, he continued watching Evan fight below. There was something strangely familiar about the young warrior. Something he couldn't quite explain. Outside, the battle reached its most dangerous moment. The gigantic monster suddenly unleashed a massive wave of dark energy. Buildings shattered. The streets cracked apart. Both Evan and Thea were thrown violently to the ground. Before either of them could recover, the creature stepped forward. Its enormous jaws slowly opened, preparing to unleash one devastating attack that could destroy everything standing before it. The gigantic monster opened its jaws, and a terrifying sphere of dark energy rapidly gathered inside its mouth. The moment Evan saw it, he understood exactly what was about to happen. "Thea," he shouted. Without a second thought, he threw himself toward her just as the creature unleashed a devastating blast. A massive wave of destructive energy surged across the battlefield. But at that exact instant, something extraordinary happened. A brilliant golden shield suddenly formed around Evan and Princess Thea. The entire battlefield froze in disbelief. The shield hadn't come from Evan's sword. It had appeared naturally, responding to the divine power awakening within him. The radiant barrier completely absorbed the monster's attack, leaving both Evan and Thea unharmed. For a brief moment, everything became silent. Even the abyss monster hesitated. Then the golden pendant hanging around Evan's neck slowly floated into the air. Ancient symbols began glowing across its surface. Warm sunlight spread throughout the battlefield. The divine light flowed across the streets, healing wounded soldiers while weakening every nearby monster. The people of the capital watched in complete amazement. Some dropped to their knees. Others began whispering ancient prayers that had been forgotten for generations. An elderly priest stared at the glowing pendant with tears in his eyes. "The light of Apollo," he whispered. "It truly exists." Watching everything from the palace walls, General Kale showed no surprise. Instead, a faint smile appeared on his face. "So," he murmured, "the awakening has finally begun." Back on the battlefield, Evan suddenly felt an overwhelming surge of power flowing through his entire body. At the same time, countless unfamiliar memories flooded his mind. He saw warriors dressed in golden armor identical to the guardian depicted inside the abandoned chapel. He saw Helios standing before an enormous gate wrapped in ancient chains. Then a powerful voice echoed through the vision. "The bloodline remembers." Before Evan could understand what it meant, the vision vanished. The monster charged once again. This time, Evan didn't hesitate. Gripping his glowing sword with both hands, he focused every ounce of Apollo's power into a single strike. The blade shone brighter than the afternoon sun. With one decisive swing, he cut straight through the monster's armored chest. A blinding explosion of golden light illuminated the entire city. When the light finally disappeared, the giant creature stood perfectly still. Dark cracks spread across its body. Seconds later, it shattered into countless black crystal fragments before dissolving into smoke. The remaining monsters immediately retreated. The royal capital had been saved. Cheers erupted throughout the city. Exhausted soldiers embraced one another. Citizens wept with relief as they thanked the brave defenders who had protected their homes. Princess Thea slowly walked toward Evan. Looking at him with genuine admiration, she said, "You saved all of us." Evan gently shook his head. "No, we saved the city together." For the first time since their paths had crossed, both of them smiled without the shadow of immediate danger hanging over them. But the peaceful moment lasted only a few seconds. A royal messenger rushed toward Thea. "Your Highness." She immediately turned. "What happened?" The messenger lowered his voice. "His Majesty requests your immediate presence. There has been an incident inside the palace." The serious expression on his face told Thea that this was far more than a routine report. After thanking Evan once again, she followed the messenger toward the royal palace. Unknown to anyone above, deep beneath the palace, General Kale entered a secret underground chamber where several hooded nobles were already waiting. One of them spoke first. The attack failed. Kale calmly removed his gloves before answering. No, it achieved exactly what I wanted. His mysterious smile suggested that the battle in the capital had only been one step in a much larger plan. Sometime later, the royal expedition stopped beside a peaceful mountain lake to rest before continuing its mission. For the first time in many days, the constant tension of battle finally eased. Soldiers gathered around campfires, preparing food and sharing stories. Laughter slowly replaced fear. One young knight eventually approached Evan with a grin. "How about a friendly duel?" The surrounding soldiers immediately gathered in a circle, eager to watch. Although Evan hesitated, he eventually accepted. The sparring match remained lighthearted. The young knight displayed impressive skill, but Evan's sharpened instincts allowed him to defend every attack with remarkable precision. He never fought aggressively. Instead, he carefully controlled his strength, making sure not to injure his opponent. After several minutes, the knight finally lowered his sword and laughed. "I surrender." The soldiers burst into applause. "You're incredible," one of them shouted. Evan smiled awkwardly. "I still have a lot to learn." Watching from nearby, Princess Thea couldn't help smiling. Unlike many powerful warriors she had known, Evan never allowed his strength to fill him with pride. His humility made him even more admirable. As night settled over the mountains, the camp gradually fell silent. Most of the soldiers drifted off to sleep. Only Evan remained awake, quietly staring into the campfire. A few moments later, Thea walked over and sat beside him. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Evan shook his head. "Too many questions." She nodded knowingly. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Evan broke the silence. "Have you ever wished you could live an ordinary life?" Thea smiled gently. "When I was younger. But not anymore." She looked up at the countless stars shining above them. "This kingdom has given me everything. If protecting it means sacrificing my own dreams." She paused before finishing her sentence. "Then it's a price I'm willing to pay." Evan looked at her with quiet admiration. "You're stronger than most people realize." Thea laughed softly. "I was about to say the same thing about you." Before either of them could continue, a deep rumble echoed through the mountains. The ground beneath the camp began to shake. Every soldier instantly jumped to their feet. What was that? Another tremor followed. This one was even more powerful. Moments later, one of the royal scouts came racing back toward the camp, struggling to catch his breath. "Your Highness, the Temple of Dawn." He pointed toward the distant mountains. "It's under attack." Before anyone could react, a brilliant crimson beam shot into the sky. The entire expedition watched in stunned silence. The ancient seal had begun reacting. Far beneath the royal palace, General Kale observed the same crimson light through a magical crystal. A calm smile spread across his face. The third seal has begun to break. Behind him, the massive stone gate trembled violently. Ancient cracks spread across its surface. Then, from the endless darkness beyond the gate, came an earth-shaking roar unlike anything heard before. Kale slowly closed his eyes. The time is almost here. Back in the mountains, Evan instinctively grabbed the golden pendant hanging around his neck. For the first time since leaving his village, it became almost too hot to touch. Then a familiar voice echoed softly inside his mind. "Hurry, before it's too late." Evan froze. He didn't know whose voice it was. Yet somehow, it sounded exactly like the father he had spent his entire life searching for. Without wasting another moment, Evan mounted his horse. Princess Thea and the royal expedition quickly followed. Together, they raced toward the Temple of Dawn. The mountain paths trembled beneath their horses as distant explosions echoed across the valley. Thick black smoke rose into the sky, mixing with the crimson light pouring from the ancient temple. Everyone understood the terrible truth. If they arrived too late, another sacred seal would be lost, allowing even more abyss creatures to invade the kingdom. The horses pushed forward at full speed until the Temple of Dawn finally appeared atop a towering cliff. Its magnificent golden pillars were now surrounded by darkness. Hundreds of royal soldiers desperately defended the entrance while monstrous creatures swarmed over the temple walls from every direction. Ancient guardian statues had awakened and were fighting alongside the defenders. Even so, they were slowly being overwhelmed. Princess Thea stared at the battlefield in disbelief. This is far worse than I imagined. Princess Thea drew her sword without hesitation. There's no time to waste, she shouted. Without waiting for further orders, the royal knights charged toward the Temple of Dawn. Evan raced beside them. The battle erupted instantly. The mountains echoed with the clash of steel against monstrous claws. Soldiers shouted commands as terrifying abyss creatures surged toward the defenders from every direction. Evan fought relentlessly through wave after wave of enemies. Whenever wounded knights became surrounded, he rushed to protect them. Every swing of his glowing sword released bursts of golden light that weakened the monsters wherever it struck. At the entrance of the temple, an elderly high priest struggled to maintain the magical barrier protecting the inner sanctuary. Sweat poured down his face as ancient symbols floated around him. His voice trembled with urgency. The seal is failing. If the guardian falls, everything will be lost. Princess Thea immediately gave her orders. Several knights remained outside to reinforce the entrance, while she and Evan fought their way into the temple itself. The interior of the Temple of Dawn was unlike any shrine Evan had visited before. Magnificent murals covered every wall, depicting the ancient gods fighting alongside humanity during the First Great War against the Abyss. At the center of the enormous sanctuary stood a towering crystal pillar radiating brilliant golden light. But something was terribly wrong. The crystal's glow was fading. Dark cracks continued spreading across its surface with every passing second. Standing before it was a hooded warrior gripping a black spear wrapped in crimson energy. Several temple guardians already lay unconscious around him. Without turning around, the stranger spoke calmly. "So, Apollo's heir has finally arrived." The voice sounded familiar. Evan immediately recognized it. "You work for General Kale." The hooded warrior slowly removed his cloak. "My name is Darius. I serve the future that cannot be stopped." Princess Thea stepped forward. "You've slaughtered innocent people just to destroy these sacred seals." Darius answered with a cold smile. "History never remembers those who stand in the way of destiny." Before anyone could stop him, he drove the black spear deep into the crystal. A deafening crack echoed throughout the temple. The sacred pillar shattered. A violent explosion of dark energy erupted across the sanctuary, throwing everyone violently backward. At the same moment, the entire mountain began shaking. Outside, enormous cracks split open across the ground. Hundreds of abyss monsters burst from beneath the earth, forcing the royal army into retreat. Inside the sanctuary, Evan slowly pushed himself back to his feet. Fragments of the shattered crystal floated throughout the chamber. An endless stream of darkness poured upward from beneath the temple floor. Darius laughed triumphantly. "The third seal has fallen." Suddenly, the darkness gathered together. It slowly formed into the shape of a gigantic shadow warrior. Unlike the ordinary monsters, this being radiated terrifying intelligence. Its crimson eyes slowly opened. An unbearable pressure spread across the temple. Nearly everyone collapsed to their knees. Only Evan remained standing. The golden pendant around his neck shone brighter than ever before. The shadow fixed its gaze on him. "So, the blood of Apollo still survives." Its deep voice shook the temple itself. Evan tightened his grip on his sword. "I won't let you destroy this kingdom." The shadow gave a chilling laugh. "You still understand nothing. I have no interest in this kingdom." Slowly, it raised one massive hand and pointed directly at Evan. "I seek only one thing. The final key." Before Evan could react, the shadow lunged forward. Instinctively, he raised his glowing sword. The collision between pure darkness and Apollo's light created a blinding explosion that illuminated the entire mountain. Outside, both armies stopped fighting. Even the sky itself turned brilliant gold. Inside Evan's mind, everything suddenly became silent. He found himself standing alone in an endless field filled with warm sunlight. Waiting before him stood the same radiant warrior who had appeared in his previous visions. But this time, the man's face was finally visible. He looked remarkably like Evan, only older, stronger, filled with quiet wisdom. The warrior smiled warmly. Evan, you've grown exactly as I hoped. Tears filled Evan's eyes. Father, the warrior nodded. My name is Helios. I wish we could have met under happier circumstances. Evan took a slow step forward. I've searched for you my entire life. Helios looked at him with both pride and sorrow. I know. Whenever I could, I watched over you. Evan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Then you're alive? Helios hesitated. My body remains imprisoned beyond the abyss. But my spirit can still reach you while Apollo's light protects your soul. Evan struggled to understand. Who imprisoned you? Helios' expression became serious. General Kale did not begin this war. He merely inherited it. The true enemy is far older. Someone who has manipulated kingdoms for centuries. The Abyss King. A heavy silence followed. Then Helios continued. The moment he obtains your blood, he looked directly into his son's eyes. The final gate will open. Everything suddenly made sense. General Kale had never truly intended to kill Evan. He needed him alive. Apollo's bloodline wasn't simply powerful. It was the final key keeping the Abyss King imprisoned. Helios spoke once more. Listen carefully. The true power of Apollo does not come from strength. It comes from a heart that chooses to protect others, even when hope seems lost. Golden light slowly surrounded him. I cannot fight beside you anymore. But you no longer need me to. You've already become the hero this kingdom has been waiting for. The vision slowly began fading away. Evan desperately reached toward him. Father, will I ever see you again? Helios smiled one final time. When the final battle begins. Then, the sunlight disappeared. Evan opened his eyes. Only a few seconds had passed inside the temple. The shadow warrior was still pressing against his glowing sword. But Evan himself had completely changed. He was no longer fighting to uncover his past. Now, he was fighting to protect the future. Golden flames burst around his body. The pendant rose into the air once again. Ancient symbols spread across the temple floor, filling the sanctuary with radiant light. Princess Thea watched in astonishment. Every surviving guardian felt hope return. Even the damaged walls began glowing with Apollo's divine light. Darius stared in disbelief. No, that's impossible. Evan slowly raised his sword. His voice remained calm but unwavering. The light isn't impossible. It simply refuses to surrender. With one mighty strike, he unleashed a massive wave of golden energy. The attack tore straight through the shadow warrior. The dark being released one final earth-shaking roar before exploding into countless fragments of black mist. Outside the temple, every remaining abyss monster immediately retreated into the mountains. Silence finally returned. Although the third sacred seal had been broken, the kingdom had escaped complete destruction. At least, for now. Princess Thea hurried toward Evan, relief clearly visible on her face, knowing that the battle had ended, but sensing that an even greater war was still waiting just beyond the horizon. After the battle at the Temple of Dawn finally came to an end, an uneasy silence settled over the mountain. Although the surviving soldiers celebrated another hard-earned victory, no one could ignore the high priest's warning. 3 of the ancient seals had already fallen. Only one remained. Everyone understood that the next battle would decide the fate of the entire kingdom. The temple itself had suffered terrible damage. Sacred pillars lay shattered across the courtyard, while priceless ancient scrolls had been destroyed during the fighting. Even so, the elderly priests gathered around the broken crystal, praying that some of its sacred power could still be preserved. Nearby, Evan stood alone at the edge of the cliff, quietly staring toward the distant northern mountains. His meeting with Helios continued echoing inside his mind. For the first time in his life, he finally knew who his father was. He understood why Helios had disappeared, and why so many powerful enemies had hunted him since childhood. But instead of finding peace, the truth had placed an even greater responsibility upon his shoulders. A few moments later, Princess Thea walked over and stood beside him. "You've been standing here for quite a while," she said gently. Evan smiled. "I've been thinking about my father." Thea nodded. "I guessed." After a brief silence, Evan finally told her everything. He explained the vision inside the temple, Helios' imprisonment, the existence of the Abyss King, and the terrifying truth that Apollo's bloodline was the final key needed to open the last gate. Thea listened carefully without interrupting him. When he finished, she looked toward the mountains. "So that's why General Kale never tried to kill you." He needed you alive. Evan nodded quietly. And if he captures me, the final seal will fall. Thea's expression immediately became firm. Then we simply won't let that happen. Her confidence made Evan smile. You make impossible things sound easy. She smiled back. Someone has to. Their conversation was interrupted when several royal scouts returned from the mountains. Their exhausted horses and worried faces revealed that something terrible had happened. One scout quickly stepped forward. Your Highness, we've located the final seal. The high priest immediately asked, Where? The sanctuary of Olympus. The old priest slowly closed his eyes. So, it has begun. Curious, Evan asked. What is the sanctuary of Olympus? The high priest answered solemnly. It is the oldest sacred sanctuary in the entire kingdom. According to legend, Apollo himself blessed it before leaving the human world. It protects the final gate separating the abyss from our realm. Another priest quietly added, If that sanctuary falls, the Abyss King will awaken completely. Princess Thea immediately ordered her commanders to prepare for departure. But before anyone could move, another royal messenger arrived carrying the king's seal. Kneeling before the princess, he delivered shocking news. Your Highness, the king orders your immediate return. Thea frowned. Why? The messenger hesitated. The royal council has declared a state of emergency. There has been a coup. Everyone froze. What? Evan asked. The messenger continued. Several nobles have seized control of the palace. General Kale now commands most of the royal army. The truth struck everyone like lightning. The monster attacks had only been a distraction, while the kingdom fought the abyss. Kale had secretly taken control of the throne itself. Princess Thea gathered her commanders. We return to the capital immediately. One knight objected. But what about the sanctuary of Olympus? Before anyone else could answer, Evan stepped forward. I'll go. Everyone turned toward him. If Kale wants Apollo's blood, he'll eventually come to the sanctuary. Thea immediately shook her head. No, it's too dangerous. Evan smiled calmly. I won't be alone. He looked toward the surviving temple guardians. Without hesitation, they stepped forward. We will protect Apollo's heir. The elderly high priest nodded. Our duty is not over. Although Thea disliked separating from Evan, she knew there was no better choice. She extended her hand toward him. Promise me something. What? No matter what happens. Don't give up. Evan looked into her eyes. I promise. She smiled sadly. And I promise. I'll save the kingdom before the final battle begins. For the first time since meeting each other, their paths separated. Thea and her loyal knights raced back toward the capital. Evan and the temple guardians began the long journey north toward the sanctuary of Olympus. Back in the royal capital, chaos had completely consumed the city. This time, the enemy wasn't the monsters. It was betrayal. Royal soldiers fought one another inside the palace. Citizens hid inside their homes while confusion spread across every district. Inside the throne room, the aging king stood face to face with General Kale. I trusted you, the king said sadly. Kale remained expressionless. You trusted the wrong future. The king drew his sword. You've betrayed every oath you ever swore. Kale answered quietly. No, I fulfilled my true purpose. The final battle inside the palace had begun. Meanwhile, Evan and the guardians finally reached the sanctuary of Olympus. The enormous temple stood high above the clouds. At the same time, Princess Thea successfully returned with loyal forces to confront General Kale. As darkness covered the battlefield, the Abyss King finally began emerging from the ancient gate. His enormous body rose above the sanctuary as endless darkness spread across the mountains. At that moment, Helios' voice echoed inside Evan's mind one last time. This is your moment. The light has always belonged to you. Golden energy erupted throughout the sanctuary. The awakened guardians raised their weapons. The priests chanted ancient prayers. The surviving soldiers stood behind Evan. Princess Thea placed one hand on his shoulder. We believe in you. The king smiled proudly. So did your father. Evan slowly closed his eyes. He remembered his mother, his peaceful village, the little girl whose toy he had returned, the refugees, Professor Orion, Lucian, the temple guardians, Princess Thea, and every person he had sworn to protect. They had all given him the strength to stand here today. He slowly raised his sword. Above him, Apollo's radiant emblem expanded until it covered the entire sanctuary like a second sun. The Abyss King roared with fury. A massive beam of darkness shot toward Evan. At the very same moment, Evan unleashed Apollo's full divine light. The two overwhelming powers collided. The entire mountain disappeared beneath an explosion of golden light and endless darkness. For several moments, nothing could be seen. Then, the darkness slowly began fading. Ancient golden chains wrapped themselves around the Abyss King once again. The enormous gate started closing. "You may imprison me today," the Abyss King growled, "but darkness will always return." Evan looked at him calmly. "Then every generation will rise to protect the light." With one final burst of Apollo's power, the gates slammed shut forever. The final seal had been restored. The remaining abyss monsters vanished into dust. Dark clouds disappeared. Warm sunlight finally shined across the kingdom once again. The long war was over. Several weeks later, peace slowly returned. Destroyed villages were rebuilt. Families returned home. The temples were restored. The king publicly revealed the truth about Helios, honoring him as one of the greatest heroes in the kingdom's history. A magnificent statue was built in the royal capital so future generations would never forget his sacrifice. Not long afterward, the aging king stepped down from the throne. Standing before the people, he placed the royal crown into Evan's hands. "This kingdom needs a ruler who fights for its people." Evan looked toward Princess Thea. She smiled warmly. Together, they accepted the responsibility of leading the kingdom into a new era. That day became one of the greatest celebrations in the kingdom's history. People from every province gathered to celebrate not a conqueror, but a protector. Evan was crowned king. Princess Thea stood proudly beside him as queen. Together, they promised to rule with justice, compassion, and courage, ensuring that no one would ever again suffer because of greed, betrayal, or hidden conspiracies. Later that evening, after the celebrations had ended, Evan quietly stepped onto the palace balcony. The restored golden pendant rested peacefully around his neck. A gentle breeze carried a familiar voice. "You've done well, my son." Evan smiled toward the stars. "Thank you, Father." As the first rays of dawn spread across the horizon, the kingdom was bathed once more in warm golden light. Evan's search for his father had finally led him to something far greater than he had ever imagined. A family, a purpose, and a kingdom worth protecting. And so, the legend of Apollo's final heir lived on for generations, reminding everyone that true greatness is never measured by the power someone is born with, but by the courage they show when choosing to protect others until the very end. That's the end of today's amazing drama explanation. If you enjoyed this full story of Fajar Olympus Future Apollo, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest Chinese drama explanations. Share this video with your friends and fellow drama lovers, and let us know in the comments which drama you'd like us to explain next. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next video with another amazing drama story.